So if you had a car that had four cylinders and only ran on two, it wouldn't run properly. LDN helps regulate a dysfunctional immune system to get the body to run properly.
Welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast, sponsored by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
I'm your host, Hoda Labrada Gore. This is episode 40, and my guest is Linda Elsegood. Linda suffered from MS and was in a wheelchair. She was getting weaker all the time. She was at the end of her rope when she heard about LDN, low-dose naltrexone. She researched it and began taking it in the year 2000, and today her health and life have turned around. She's interviewed hundreds of people with a variety of conditions whose health has improved on LDN. She even founded the LDN Research Trust, and she helped pull off an LDN conference in Orlando recently. She's also edited and contributed to the LDN book that's called The LDN Book. You will find her story compelling and her efforts to help others inspiring. Before we get into the conversation, we want to pause and thank our sponsors. Real Milk. Real Milk is nature's perfect food, realmilk.com. And the Weston A. Price Foundation. They are dedicated to restoring nutrient-dense foods to the diet through education, research, and activism. Go to westonaprice.org. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Linda.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Tell me a story of the benefits of LDN. Tell me a story of one person who's used it and found benefit.
Oh, I've interviewed over 556 people now, and the stories are amazing. To pick one, a young lady who had a child who was a baby, and she'd got fibromyalgia, and she was so sick that she wasn't able to pick the little girl up or cuddle her or play with her. She just used to lie on the sofa, not being able to function or do anything, and she was in so much pain. Her pain was extraordinary. And she said to me that she used to wake up every morning and think, I'm still here. You know, I wish I'd have died in the night because I can't cope with another day of the pain. And she started LDN, and it was only a few months later she was able to function again. Her child had her mother back, her husband had his wife back. She was able to cook and clean and shop, and she then went back to work, which I think is an amazing story. Her life was completely turned round.
Wow, I'm just trying to pick my jaw up off the floor, actually. What a tremendous story. And that is one among many, 500 something that you've interviewed, and many others. Why don't you define LDN for our listeners and then tell us how you came across it, Linda?
Okay. LDN stands for low-dose naltrexone, and naltrexone has been used for many years. In the 70s, it was developed and used for alcohol and heroin addiction. And since 1985, it's been used for autoimmune conditions. Dr. Bernard Bahari, back in 1985, was actually using it in his clinical practice. So although low-dose naltrexone hasn't been trialed fully for any condition, there have been small trials and small studies, but not full trials. It can be prescribed off-label on a named patient-only basis. There are 220 different conditions that LDN could help with. I know that sounds an amazing amount, a very high number, but they are autoimmune conditions, so they all have a component there that link them in some way, be it like regional pain syndrome, as I just said, fibromyalgia, MS, Crohn's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, type 1 diabetes. It's also being used for autism and things that children have, arthritis and eczema and asthma, psoriasis. The list goes on. It's really interesting. The more you learn about it, the more there is to learn.
And do tell us how you got started with it.
Okay, I've got multiple sclerosis. I was very, very sick, and I progressed even further. For example, I would have a relapse, which would mean I had new symptoms. I was going further and further downhill. And by October 2003, I was told I was secondary progressive MS. And at that time, the left-hand side of me was numb with pins and needles. I had terrible pains. I had burning limbs, restless legs, twitching muscles. I was choking on my food. I had double vision. I lost the hearing in my left ear. I lost my bowel and bladder control. I had vertigo, no balance.
Goodness.
My
Wow.
left leg, the strength used to go. So I used to fall and trip and stumble, and spent a lot of time on the floor. I I was in a wheelchair outside of the house because I couldn't walk. And I was then told that I was secondary progressive MS and nothing more could be done for me. And I spent most of my time in bed or on the toilet or on the floor. And life was just passing me by. I wasn't living. It was just waking up in the morning, trying to have enough energy, because fatigue was a really big thing, that somebody would have to help me shower. And by the time I managed to get up, was showered and back in bed, I was exhausted. There was no energy left to do anything. And I'm the type of person that likes to achieve things. I like to set goals and targets and aims and reach them and achieve things. And I was failing with any small task. I couldn't go to the toilet without wetting myself. I was spilling things, and it was awful. It was absolutely awful. And what I found really hard was the look in everybody's eyes of family and friends, where they felt sorry for me. They wanted to help me but didn't know how to. And that's really difficult to take when you're in that situation. So I thought that I wasn't unique, that there must be people out there with MS having to cope the same as myself. I was only able to sit at a computer for 10 minutes. That's all I could do. It was just too much for me. But I managed eventually to find people in America who were taking LDN. And I managed to speak to some of these people, and they all said the same, that if it wasn't going to do me any good, it wouldn't do me any harm. And at that time, living in my head was like a television set that wasn't tuned in. I couldn't see properly. I couldn't think properly. I couldn't hear properly. I couldn't process anything. When I was trying to put a sentence together, it would come out back to front and completely gobbledygook. People couldn't understand what I was saying. So I used to try very hard to put the sentence together in my head before I said it. And it used to come out very slow and slurred, as though I'd had a stroke. And cognitively, it was like English was my second language. I couldn't recall vocabulary. I couldn't remember things. I'd perhaps call a cat a dog a horse. But I was thinking myself, I was saying it correctly. And my husband kept helping me, as he thought, by saying to me, don't you mean this? Don't you mean when you say... And I said to him, please don't. It's so depressing that every time I open my mouth, you're telling me I'm wrong. If you know what I should be saying, just accept it. Oh, but if I tell you next time, you will know. Well, no, it doesn't work like that. All you're doing is depressing me. But I had got to the point before I started LDN, as many people have told me. So I'm not unique in this either, that I really didn't want to continue living as I was living. It was awful. The only reason that stopped me from doing anything was the working out who was going to find me, and it was going to be my 15-year-old daughter. So I wasn't going to ruin her life by doing that, even though I knew everybody would have understood why I had done it. Um, you still can't do that to a child.
Of course.
So I had all the information on LDN. I had to then get a prescription. I couldn't get a prescription from my own doctor, so I had to get a private prescription. And what was amazing, I was told that you may have introductory side effects. You might have bowel problems. You might have headaches, disturbed sleep, vivid dreams. I had nothing. I prayed for side effects just to show me it was working. I was impatient. I just wanted to know it's doing something. And I could have been taking aspirin or saccharin or something. It did nothing. And every day I used to, at the bottom of my bed, there was a picture of my two daughters, and I could see the frame double, one in front of the other.
Oh.
And I used to try and move my head to make them level up. Of course, they didn't. But one morning, 3 weeks later, I opened my eyes and the picture frames were nearly level. It was amazing. And I'd got some hearing back in my ear, and I could actually process thoughts properly. And it was like, wow, whoa. It was amazing. It took me 18 months to get out of the wheelchair and walk properly and get my balance back. And it caused me a lot of problems with my legs because I hadn't been exercising and my tendons had shrunk. But LDN for me has been truly amazing. Truly, truly amazing.
It does. It sounds absolutely amazing. I'm flabbergasted, actually, at your recovery. You said it took 18 months to get out of the wheelchair. I'm thinking that actually sounds pretty good, because some people are confined for the rest of their lives. I imagine there are many people who struggle with MS, which is a degenerative disease, right? And they never find hope or a cure or a improvement of any kind.
Yes. Well, when I say 18 months, it wasn't 18 months to get out. It was 18 months to walk any distance. So, yes.
That's so phenomenal. Now, did you have a background in studying health and wellness at all, or?
No, nothing whatsoever. So I had to learn quickly, and then it was, what do I do with this knowledge, this information that I have learned? Do I say I'm okay now and just get on with my life and turn my back on being ill, or do I want to help other people who are in that deep dark place that I was in, that maybe hadn't got the strength to get out of it? So it was a no-brainer. I wanted to help other people, and I set up a registered charity here in the UK, and we operate throughout the world, in February 2004. So that's just over 12 years now. But the last few years, things have come on very quickly, which is really good. We're getting more doctors and pharmacists contacting us. We have over 80 people a day from the US looking for LDN prescribers. So all in all, I'm pretty pleased with the way it's going. We need more to be done, but we are getting there slowly.
Well, since you've studied this, what is it about LDN that makes it such a miracle cure in a way? You say it addresses so many different issues. What is it about it that makes it so effective?
Okay, well, LDN has a dual mechanism. It helps boost the endorphins, and it also works on toll-like receptors, which reduce inflammation. So if you had a car that had 4 cylinders and only ran on 2, it wouldn't run properly. LDN helps regulate a dysfunctional immune system to get the body to run properly.
Oh, I see. And so where have trials been run? You said earlier that there have only been some small ones. Where have they been run? Do doctors see this as promisingly as the people who've benefited from it do?
I think so. There have been, Dr. Jill Smith has done 2 studies for Crohn's and pediatric Crohn's. Jared Younger has done 2 fibromyalgia studies. Dr. Pradeep Chopra has done a study on regional pain syndrome. And there are many other ones. Dr. Akbar Khan did one on a paper published on tongue cancer.
Mm.
And there's been a really big one that was published earlier this year on LDN and cancer, where they found at gene level they were able to isolate the cancer cells, turn them off so it stopped them multiplying, and then were able to actually kill them.
We want to stop for a moment and recognize our sponsors, Real Milk. Real Milk is pasture-fed, unprocessed, full-fat, nature's perfect food. Find out about the benefits of real raw milk and where you can obtain it at realmilk.com. And the Weston A. Price Foundation. Confused about nutrition? The Weston A. Price Foundation sets the record straight. Find out why butter is a health food, why soy foods are not your friend, and why optimal health is found in the wise food traditions of our ancestors at westonaprice.org. And now, back to the interview. Linda, some of my listeners look askance at all conventional medicine. What would you say to those who are wary of using any kind of pharmaceutical drug?
Many LDN prescribers prescribe it and call it more or less a holistic approach, because back in 1970s when naltrexone was trialled, it was only found harmful to the liver in doses of 300 milligrams a day, and the addicts were only taking 50 milligram tablets 3 times a day. So they were only taking half what was the harmful level. And LDN, which is low dose naltrexone, is usually 3 to 4.5 milligrams a day. So you can see it's a very minute dose.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been lots of trials and studies in the labs by Dr. Ian Sagon and his team and Dr. Patricia McLaughlin. They have done, I would say hundreds, it's probably not hundreds, but maybe 100 different studies for LDN in mice models, and have found, wonderful things, which also helps with the safety and efficacy of LDN.
And yet some of the uses for which it's recommended are still off-label, correct?
Oh, yes. Until LDN has been through full trials, it won't be approved by your FDA or the NHS over here. But it is a relatively inexpensive drug. It works out roughly about $1 or less at some compounding pharmacies a day. So like $30 a month. It has very few side effects. And as I say, I didn't actually have any side effects at all. Some people say they have such fantastic vivid dreams they can't wait to go to bed. But that missed me by. I didn't have any of those.
How many people are availing themselves of it? How many people are still suffering needlessly, would you say?
Oh, the unfortunate thing is people are being diagnosed with autoimmune conditions every day. So even if people have had conditions for a long time and find out about LDN, there are still new people coming on the scene who LDN could possibly help every day.
It's so sad. It's such a crisis, isn't it?
It is. It also has shown to be a beneficial help to people with Lyme disease as well, and that is something that is quite a problem in quite a few states in America, as you probably know.
I do know. As a matter of fact, some are saying it's no longer transmitted via tick. They suspect there are other sources of it.
Yes, we're told now that babies are being born with it, and it's also sexually transmitted, and it's in saliva as well.
Now, you've even written a book, and I understand you hold conferences because you're really trying to get the word out about it, aren't you?
I most certainly am. We had a conference this year in Orlando in February, and that is when the LDN book was actually launched at the conference. And it's a book that I would dearly have loved to have read when I was doing my research on LDN. So when I was asked to write a book, I sat down and thought, okay, what would I like to see in an LDN book to make it similar to an LDN Bible, if you like.
Uh-huh.
And it's been amazing because I've interviewed quite a few doctors who've got the book and they get their staff to read it and they use it as a reference. So I'm pleased that it hit the spot that I was aiming for. There's a lot of information in there that the layperson would enjoy and get from it. If you dug deeper, it's a lot of information for doctors. But I would say even those people that are ill, we're like sponges. We want to know everything about our condition. So even though some of it is rather technical, I think it's still of interest. And the first chapter is very interesting, and it would address those questions you were just asking me about the history and the pharmacology of LDN. And that is a really good, interesting chapter that explains where naltrexone came from, why naltrexone was developed, and how it is being used in low doses. So that is really interesting. And then I thought to have some chapters on actual conditions. So I picked the main conditions because obviously we couldn't have all 220 in one book. It would be an enormous book. So we've got MS and lupus, inflammatory bowel disease. So that covers Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, thyroid disorders, which is another really big one because it covers so many different aspects of thyroid disease, restless leg syndrome, that's another really good one, depression, autism, cancer. And then I wanted to make it a whole round experience, if you like, with all the different information. So we've got a really good introduction to the book by Dr. Jill Cattell. And then we have right at the back in one of the appendixes is how to start a conversation with your doctor to get your doctor to prescribe LDN for you, what you need to do and take with you. And then we've got some frequently asked questions at the end. So I was really pleased how the book shaped up and came together, and all the doctors were amazing. They've all signed to have all the royalties given to the LDN Research Trust. It was very generous of them to give up all their time, and it does take more time than I anticipated to write a book. And like you say, we have these conferences which are a really good educator for anybody really, but many doctors get an awful lot from it, and we live stream them around the world, so anybody with access to fast speed internet can actually watch the conferences if they're there.
Oh, well, I commend you for all that you're doing, and I'm going to mention your website and all these resources at the end of the show. As we start to wrap up, I do want to hear one more story of someone whose health improved from LDN.
Okay, a lady called Angela. She'd got alopecia, and she was a business lady, and her hair was falling out. And one day she found a little velvety patch at the back of her head, and she kept stroking it and thinking it felt velvety, and she thought, oh, that's really cute, that feels really nice. But she didn't realize that patch was growing, and the reasoning it was velvety was because her hair was falling out. And slowly her hair got worse, and she was standing up doing business presentations, and of course, being a young girl, really pretty young girl too, losing her hair, is really frightening. And she saw a dermatologist, and he said to her, there are some very nice scarves out there these days.
Oh my gosh.
And she just couldn't work out what was happening to her. But she'd got some gut issues, and she was having some pain, and nobody was helping her. And she said she got to the stage where she'd get up in the morning and she'd look at herself in the mirror, and she'd got no identity. She'd got no eyebrows, no eyelashes, no hair. Her whole face was just unrecognizable as a person. And she studied all the symptoms that she had, and she realized that there was a thread going through all of these conditions, that the underlying cause could possibly be autoimmune. So she researched it herself. She managed to get LDN, and very quickly, in just a few weeks, she started to have hair. Her hair was growing. This is a girl who had no body hair. She had no hair anywhere. It had all gone. She's now got lovely hair, and some of it, and it's come back more like baby hair. It's fine. It's very soft, and it's grown mottled. Some of it is blondie color. Some are a bit darker, and some are sort of grey. And people say to her, "Oh, where did you have your hair done? It's amazing." It looks beautiful. But she says she doesn't care. She's got hair, you know.
That's right.
She's got some eyebrows back and everything. And her life is just totally, totally transformed. And she's not the only person that I've heard with alopecia where the hair has come back.
And the hair, of course, represents her overall health. What's come back is her health. And
exactly.
That's fantastic. So tell me, what is one thing, Linda, that you would recommend that the listener do to improve their health?
Okay, I think it's very important, and maybe I should have done it sooner, is to take ownership of your own health. I'm sure conventional doctors do their best, but many times there are other things out there that you could actually try. So I would say don't ever give up. Keep looking, researching. An LDN, if you have an autoimmune condition, is really worthwhile investigating and doing some research. And if anybody wants to get hold of me to ask any questions, please do so. We have a board of medical doctors. If there are medical questions that I am unable to answer, I can get those answers for you. And I would be more than happy to help and assist anybody.
Well, Linda, you've been a delightful guest. Thank you so much for sharing your information, and we are so pleased to hear of your own health recovery, and we wish you the best.
Thank you very much.
My guest today was Linda Elsegood. You can see videos from the LDN conference she mentioned at ldn2016.com, or go to ldnresearchtrust.org for more information on the trust and her work. You can also find her book on chelseagreen.com or on Amazon. All of these links, of course, can be found on our show notes page. Go to westinaprice.org, click on the podcast page, and go to episode 40 for the show notes.
Did you know that there are Weston A. Price Foundation chapters all over the U.S. and around the world? Chapter leaders help you find good food in your area, and some have meetings you can attend. Go to our website, westinaprice.org, and click on Find a Local Chapter to see if there is one near you. Wise Traditions is brought to you by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. The content of this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for medical advice.